Glock Gen 5 triggers. Let's talk about them. So if you're in the market for a Gen 5 trigger, you do have a lot of options out there. Now, I've only tested 3 different Gen 5 triggers. The Tyrant Designs I.T.T.S Gen 5 trigger, the Killer Innovations Velocity trigger, and the Overwatch Precision TAC trigger. And there are some manufacturers out there that require trigger bars from Glock, and those are basically out of stock. So I chose the 3 easiest triggers that I could find that were aluminum and that I was looking at, and kind of just decided that those are the ones that I wanted to purchase and try out. So the Tyrant, I actually didn't see a whole lot of reviews on, so I wanted to try out a Tyrant trigger because I've tried out other Tyrant products and I've been really impressed with other Tyrant products. The same goes with Killer Innovations. I didn't see a whole lot of people talking about the Killer Innovations Velocity trigger, so I decided to go ahead, pull the trigger and purchase the trigger itself and do my own review. And then the Overwatch Precision TAC trigger, which actually has quite a bit of YouTubers out there talking about this trigger, and the consensus is this is a good trigger. So those are the 3 triggers that I've done some testing with, and I'll go over first what the OEM trigger is just in general. So this is an OEM trigger shoe that I changed out, and there's a top pin and that connects to your trigger bar, and the bottom pin itself is what is connected to the safety blade. And there's a little leaf spring on that safety blade. You can change that out if you lose tension on the safety blade, or you can rebend that leaf spring. But you can see with the safety blade fully engaged, it does stick out a little bit. It doesn't sit flush on that trigger shoe, and that was something that I wanted an improvement with. So when I was shooting my my self-defense ammunition and my high-pressure cartridges, I could feel that on my finger, and it left a little line on my finger after long range sessions. So that was something that I was trying to get an improvement with. It's also plastic. The actual trigger face of the OEM doesn't feel all that bad to me, and the trigger pull on an OEM doesn't feel that bad. But I like the feel of a metal trigger shoe. That's just my preference. And I like the safety to fit flush. So those are some things that I want an improvement on. Now, the Gen 5 trigger wasn't, like I said, all that bad. The reset was pretty good. You know, I was perfectly fine with the reset of the Gen 5 trigger out of the box. Now, all my OEM Gen 5s say that they're 5.5 pound triggers out of the box. It doesn't matter if they're blue label, if they're red label, it doesn't matter if it's a 17 or 19. Now, the Glock 34 Gen 5, I believe out of the box says it has a 4.5 pound trigger. So that's a more competition styled firearm. So I think Glock put a different connector in there. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do know it's a lighter by about a pound out of the box, the Glock 34, which is a 17 frame with a longer slide. So that would be the only difference. So the first trigger that I'll be talking about here is the Tyrant Designs I.T.T.S Gen 5 trigger. Now, Tyrant Designs is based out of Chicago, Illinois, and I actually have a lot of experience with Tyrant's products. I've been using their back plates, their slide stop slide releases for a while. Their magazine extensions are really good for the money. So I wanted to try out the I.T.T.S trigger for the Gen 5. It was widely available, and it had a lot of different colors. They had gold, black, red, gray, blue. Safety blade colors are black and gold. So any combination of those colors that you want, you can get with the Tyrant Designs I.T.T.S trigger. And this was actually the most economical trigger that I could find on the market as far as aluminum trigger shoes go. And I really like the design of the I.T.T.S trigger. It's a larger profile than an OEM trigger shoe. It does stick out a little bit further. Like I said, the profile on the top is definitely wider and thicker as far as going this way. The face of it isn't any wider to me, but it is a flat face. And the safety blade itself doesn't come all the way down to the end of the trigger shoe. You have about 2 millimeters on the bottom. So if you pull from the bottom, you can feel that, you know, about on the middle of your pad right there. When you're first engaging the safety, that doesn't bother me. It does fit flush on the actual face of the trigger. So that, you know, it is what it is, but that's something that I did notice, whereas the other two triggers that I'll be talking about do sit all the way down to the end of the trigger. You can see the this little back portion of the safety. It doesn't stick out a whole lot, so it is very easy to engage that safety, but it still keeps the safety mechanism intact, so you're not able to engage the trigger without depressing that safety blade. So I actually prefer a longer length of pull, and that's what you'll get with the Tyrant Designs I.T.T.S trigger. I have long skeleton fingers, and I prefer a little bit longer length of pull, so I like that larger profile trigger. And I did notice it does reduce the take up quite a bit on the trigger compared to the OEM. Now I'm pulling a little bit of creep, and it's got a nice crisp break. This isn't the crispest break out of all three, but it's still a very nice crisp break on it. The reset is actually really good. Tyrant states that you get a 20 to 25% better reset than an OEM reset, and I can feel it, I can hear it. There is definitely a improved difference with the reset, and that's saying a lot because I actually like the reset of a Gen 5 trigger. So we'll check it out again. There's the take up. This doesn't reduce the take up the most out of all three triggers, but it definitely reduces take up. You still have a little bit of movement, and pulling, and a nice clean break. So good trigger for the money. Now this retails for $75. If you use the coupon code WELCOME5, it'll save you 5% off of anything off their website, including their trigger. That doesn't do anything for me. That's just a coupon code that I found online to save you a little bit of money. And I don't have any sort of relationship with Tyrant. They didn't send me that coupon code. I'm not getting any kickbacks. They didn't send me the trigger for free, and they're not paying me either. So just as a disclosure, none of the manufacturers out there have done that. I don't have any relationship with any of these manufacturers that I'm doing reviews for. So, but let's do a trigger pull gauge to see what this pulls at. Now, I did a previous Gen 5 trigger video, and I did notice that this was pulling about 5 pounds last time. And what I did notice, because I did a disassembly on all these Glocks and was cleaning them, I didn't polish the internals on this. So I went ahead and polished the connector bar, the cruciform, the trigger bar itself, the safety plunger, just like I did with my 17 and my 19, just to kind of give this a fair shake, because this was breaking at basically 5 pounds consistently. So I did notice that I didn't polish those internals, and now this trigger breaks pretty much at 4.5 pounds. So that was just a little bit above 4.5. So we'll call that 4.6. So I did reduce the trigger pull of this. This is breaking at 5.5 there, pretty much on the button. And we'll do one more just to give it a fair shake. And it's another 4.5 pound trigger pull. So by polishing the internals, I did reduce the trigger pull by 0.5 pound, making this a 4.5 pound trigger. And I can say there's a noticeable difference to me. I do carry this trigger. I like that it's versatile. So this isn't so light that you won't be able to carry it and feel unsafe. and I do really like this trigger. And like I said, this is the most economical trigger on the market, and you're still getting a good looking, good functioning trigger that offers all the benefits of an aftermarket trigger. So I really, really do like the Tyrant Designs I.T.T.S trigger. Now, something to note, I do have about 1,000, maybe 1,050 rounds out of that gun with that trigger. So next up on the review is the Killer Innovations Velocity trigger. Killer Innovations, based out of Olympia, Washington. It's a American manufacturing company, and I also did try out quite a bit of Killer Innovations products and was really impressed with them. So really like their magazine extensions. These are my favorite magazine extensions on the market. The ease of use, the assembly, maintenance, the design, everything I think is the best as far as a magazine extension, but it's also one of the most expensive at 50 bucks. But I really like how much detail they've put into the magazine extension. And it does actually offer just a little bit easier to rip out of magazine carriers and stuff too. And I was really impressed with their velocity slide, so I went ahead and tried, you know, their velocity trigger. And their velocity trigger comes also in a wide range of colors. Their gold is a little bit different than, you know, titanium nitride, as you can see right here. So it's a little bit darker gold than titanium nitride. It's got a smaller profile instead of a larger profile compared to the Tyrant trigger. You can see right there what a OEM trigger shoe would look like. It's also a flat face trigger on the face of it. The safety does run all the way down to the tip of the actual trigger, and that safety dingus in the back sticks out quite a bit further than the Tyrant's. Now on the face of the trigger itself, it's got some ribbing, and the feel of it feels more like a Cerakoted slide or a Cerakoted paint on it. It is anodized, but that it just got a little more texture than the Tyrant's trigger. So that is something that I did notice. Killer Innovations does have coupon codes. You do have to sign up for their email mailing list, and they'll send you a 10% off coupon. This velocity trigger retails for $115 with that 10% off coupon, and you can use that on anything and you know, combination of things. So if you want to save 10% off a magazine extension, a slide, and a trigger, you can do that with that coupon code they send to your email that's attached to your email. That'll bump the price of this $115 trigger down to $103.50. So it's a $115 trigger, so it's definitely more than the Tyrant's. It's 50% more than the Tyrant's trigger. But what are you getting for 50% more? Well, one of the things that you'll be getting from Killer Innovations is a very, very good customer support team. Anitra, their customer service representative, is a very good customer service representative. If you have any questions about their products and you email them during business hours, Anitra will contact you, email you back with an answer within an hour or two. And I actually find that's really impressive. And Killer Innovations actually seems to stand by their products, which I really, really like. So that's one of the things that you'll be you know, one of the features that you'll be buying with the Velocity trigger or the Velocity line in general. The design, if you like a smaller profile trigger and a, you know, shorter length of pull, that's something that you'll be getting too. And the take-up is reduced even more than the Tyrant's. So you can see how much take-up you have right there. And it's got a cleaner break than the Tyrant's. The reset, I did clean the internals, and what I found was the reset got better when I cleaned it. So maybe it was just gunked up a little bit dirty than from when I did that video. Now you see there was a little bit of movement there, and it just breaks very, very cleanly. This definitely has a cleaner break than the Tyrants. And there's the reset, there's the take up, and there's the break. Nice, crisp, clean break. So let's do a trigger pull gauge on the Killer Innovations velocity trigger. This broke right at like 4.2 pounds. So a little over 4 pounds right there. So it's definitely a lighter trigger than the Tyrants, with the same OEM parts, polished and everything. It broke right at 4.4 pounds there. So a little under 4.5. We'll do one more. And this broke again at about 4.2 pounds right there. So it's not as consistent. It breaks anywhere between 4.2 and 4.5. This probably breaks closer to 4.2. So it's a lighter trigger than the Tyrants. It's got a shorter take up than Tyrants. And it's got a cleaner break than the Tyrants. So that's what you'll be getting for, you know, 50% more cost than the Tyrants trigger. If you like the design, that's also something. It's got a cutout. The Tyrant does not have a cutout on it. One thing I have noticed about this trigger that I didn't like was how much room you have on the top of the face of the trigger itself. I have skinny fingers, so I can get my whole finger up there and pull this trigger without engaging it. You can see if I have to kind of be aware and sweep my finger underneath in order to engage that trigger. So that's something that I didn't like about this trigger. I'm not entirely comfortable with carrying this trigger yet because of that. So if I were to unholster it, pull it out, present it, and every time I pull the trigger, I want it to go boom. And I can't get that with this. So maybe I need more training with this trigger, or I need fatter fingers, people with larger fingers than mine, because I have very skinny fingers. You may not have the same problem as I do with this trigger, but that was something that I did notice with it. So, but everything else seems to function very, very well. Like the take-up's super, super short. Really nice break. I really like the break of this. It breaks really, really cleanly. The reset, it got substantially better since I cleaned it. So like I said, I think it was gunked up from the last time, but the safety blade does stick out just a little bit further than that Tyrant. So you can see how much room you have. If I were a trigger engineer for Killer Innovations, I'd actually move the pivot point of the safety blade up about 2 millimeters, and I wouldn't let this protrude quite so much. So, but that's just my personal preference. And this does install with a set screw, so the installation is very simple with a set screw installation. Both the Tyrant and the Killer Innovations installation were super easy with set screws. And which brings me to my third trigger, is the Overwatch Precision TAC trigger. And this trigger was the only one that was roll pin installation. And they did start the roll pin for me, but you can see, you know, you can install this trigger backwards. And I don't know about you, but I am definitely not as good as knocking in roll pins as it is, you know, taking an Allen wrench and just screwing in a set screw. So that is one of the negatives about the Overwatch Precision trigger. Now, Overwatch Precision is based out of Phoenix, Arizona. It is a very small company. It's got 5 guys and a girl machining all their stuff. And they're mostly known for their triggers and their mag wells. They don't quite offer as many aftermarket parts as Killer Innovations or Tyrant, but their triggers are well known, more or less. They do offer a lot more different triggers for Gen 5s than Killer Innovations or Tyrant. They have this TAC trigger, which comes, I believe, flat-faced or curved. I think it's like the TAC is the flat, the Falc is the curved, and then they have a polymer version of this trigger, of the flat or curved version, and then they have a polydat trigger, which is their most economical, but that is still $60. This particular trigger shoe was $115, so it's the same price as the Killer Innovations. And like Killer Innovations, they also have a 10% off coupon code if you sign up for their emailing list, making it the exact same price as Killer Innovations at $103.50 with that coupon code, and that's just for the trigger shoe. Now, they do offer a service where you can send your OEM connector bar or trigger bar to them and they'll install it. I believe it's like a $40 upcharge for that. And then they do sell, if they have in stock, an OEM trigger bar connected to their TAC trigger, which I believe is $125, and then they have an MP3 coded OEM trigger bar connected to their TAC trigger for $135. But those are basically sold out, and they stay sold out. So they're definitely harder to find. So their TAC trigger shoe is in stock for the most part. They do offer 4 different colors of their trigger shoes. I believe there's black, gray, FDE, and another color I can't think of. And then there's safety blades. You can actually choose gold, black, blue, or red. So any combination of colors there. So I actually think you have the most combination of colors as far as your choice, but they have the least amount of colors for the trigger shoe. It is a flat face design. It reminds me a lot of the Killer Innovations like profile and everything. So you can see here the profile is about the same. The safety doesn't stick out quite as much. And it's got just like a little swoop on the bottom, which I actually do prefer on the Overwatch Precision, as opposed to just basically a ribbed flat design on the Killer Innovations. The feel of it it's definitely more of a slick finish instead of a matte finish, and to me this is a good looking trigger too. I don't know. I actually think the Killer Innovations trigger probably has the best design look if you're just going based on aesthetics. This is probably my second favorite design out of all 3 triggers. And Tyrants, I still like the design, but it's probably my least favorite. But let's go ahead and do the take up on it. So it's got just I think it doesn't have as reduced take up as the Killer Innovations. This has a little more take up than the Killer Innovations, and it's got a little more creep. But this break, I don't know. To me, the Killer Innovations and the Overwatch have almost the same feeling of Christmas and break. There's a little bit of creep. There's a little more creep in this trigger as opposed to the Killer Innovations and the Tyrants. Reset is really, really good. So there's the take up. There's a little bit of creep, and then a nice, crisp, clean break. I didn't feel any creep on that one. Let's do it one more time. All right, so you can definitely stage the take up and kind of slap the trigger on this. I will say subjectively, the break feels a little bit better on this Overwatch. So let's do the Wheeler trigger pull gauge and see what this breaks at. So this broke right at 4.2, 4.3 pounds. So basically in between 4.5 and 4, like right in the middle there. This broke at 4 pounds right there, maybe a little bit under 4 pounds, but it's pretty much right at 4 pounds. So again, based on my last video and testing, this has the lightest trigger pull out of all 3. And another 4-pound trigger pull. Now I did, again, clean up everything because I do lube my guns, and I I just cleaned off, you know, the cruciform, the trigger housing, stuff like that, the safety plunger, and then that might have actually improved the feel of some of these triggers. So I'm going to do one more just to, that wasn't right because it says it broke at like 2.5 pounds, but I'm going to redo it. All right, so about 4.5 pounds. So this is the lightest trigger out of all of them. And it costs the same price as the Killer Innovation, so it's really hard to say which trigger is the best, because you do have to keep into account a few things. Now, these triggers here are the exact same price. They have about the same profile, right? There's the take up, break and break. To me, both of these triggers look about the same to me. Right? These function almost exactly the same. So it'll be your preference of colors. If you like this little swoop on the end, if you like the ribbing of this, if you like the protruding safety on this, I mean, that's really what you'll be looking for. Now, and as far as the differences go on the Killer Innovations to the Overwatch Precision, I can tell you it's a little easier to engage the safety on this, where definitely not, but I can still run into the same issue with both of these triggers hitting on top, just because of how skinny my fingers are. So I have the same issue on both of these triggers. I can honestly say it's a little more pronounced on the Killer Innovations, but subjectively, the Overwatch Precision to me feels like a better trigger than the Killer Innovations. But to me, they're almost the exact same trigger, which I find pretty interesting. So what I would suggest to you is, you know, what are you looking for out of a trigger? All these triggers offer an improvement over the take up, the break, the reset, the feel of it, the safety. I mean, all of them improve on everything that you'll be looking for out of a trigger. Now, it's going to be dependent. If you want something maybe to color match your titanium nitride, and you're looking for something a little more economical, your Tyrant Designs CNC trigger is definitely going to be the trigger for you. I have been really impressed with the Tyrant Designs I.T.T.S Gen 5 trigger, especially for the price. For $75, you're looking at 50%, almost 50% less than what the Overwatch or the Killer Innovations is at, you know, let's call it $70, $71.25 for this trigger. It's got a really crisp break. It's not as crisp as Killer Innovations or Overwatch Precision, but I don't have the same issue pulling it from the top as I do from the Killer Innovations one. You can see I'm all the way at the top and I can still pull that trigger. So I feel very comfortable carrying this trigger. And I do carry this trigger. I trust my life with this trigger. So that does mean something to me. If you don't like the larger profile trigger, this trigger may not be for you. But I got to tell you, for the money, this to me is a really, really good trigger. I don't see why anybody wouldn't be happy with this retail $75 trigger as opposed to the retail $115 trigger from Overwatch. Like, it is subjectively better, but is it really worth 50% more? You could use that $35, $45 to buy a set of iron sights for, you know, the Glock platform. On a good day, I can find a set of True Glow or Ameriglow tritium night sights on both the front and the rears for $45, $50, maybe $55. So you can almost buy a set of tritium night sights for the extra costs that you would be spending on a Tyrant over an Overwatch, right? So it depends what you want. I mean, Overwatch is definitely known for a good trigger, but really, subjectively, the Overwatch feels slightly better than the Killer Innovations, but not by much. And you can see the profile's about the same. The prices are the same. If you like Killer Innovation stuff and you want a color match, this is a Strike Industries magazine release, and it does color match at least the Killer Innovations. And the backplate does look different than, you know, you can see the color difference on the Tyrant backplate to the Killer Innovation. So if you want a color match, you know, your Killer Innovation stuff, you stick with the Killer Innovation trigger. You can see the slide stop slide release doesn't exactly match, and the cross armory gold set doesn't exactly match. So this is a PVD coated Rival Arms barrel. It color matches better than a titanium nitrided barrel, but only by a little. So if that's something you want to do, then I get it with the Killer Innovations. But the Killer Innovations is still a very, very good trigger. And I found an improvement on this trigger after I cleaned it. So I was giving the edge to the Overwatch, and I'll still give the edge to the Overwatch. So if money wasn't an issue, the Overwatch Precision TAC trigger is the best trigger out of all of them that I've tested. Now, only by a little bit is the Killer Innovations that much worse. So, and I can't even tell you what it is. I mean, the break is just a little less crisp on the Killer Innovations. Everything else is basically the same. I do think that the trigger is a little less accessible on the Killer Innovations, so maybe that's where I'll knock it a little bit. Now, and if you don't like that completely flat rib face, as opposed to, you can get a more consistent trigger placement because of that little swoop on the end, I mean, that could be, you know, a pro for the Overwatch. But really, for the price, I got to give it to Tyrant. Tyrant Designs I.T.T.S trigger. Again, if you don't want that larger profile, I get it. But really, for the price, I think Tyrant really knocked it out of the park. And I don't really see a whole lot of people talking about the Tyrant Designs I.T.T.S trigger. And I don't know why. I know people have purchased this trigger, have used it, and have been satisfied like I have. But really, the most economical aluminum trigger shoe on the market for the Gen 5 platform isn't being talked about. I'm not a big fan of their magazine releases, but I like their slide stop slide releases. I like their back plates. I like their magazine extensions, and I like their I.T.T.S triggers. I think they're good looking triggers. They reduce the take up. It's got a crisp break, a super nice reset. You know, you can't ask for much more out of an aftermarket trigger. Now, is it worth the extra $45 to get a Overwatch Precision trigger? It might be to you, but it really isn't to me. I buy gun parts regardless, so I'm going to buy, you know, a $150 Timney Alpha competition trigger. Granted, I'm probably going to pay $100 for it brand new, because I look for good deals. That's why you'll hear me talk about coupon codes. If you ever want to ask me personally, just comment below on how I save money on certain things, and I'll let you know. I just can't leak to anything in a YouTube video, because I think they'll ban my video. Not that I'm looking to get monetized or anything like that. I could care less about ad revenue. I don't get ad revenue. I don't care about YouTube flagging my video. That's why I put copyrighted music in my videos. So I'm not really concerned about things unless they completely ban my video, which I think links to gun parts will. So, man, it's a really hard one. I mean, all three of these triggers are good, and I don't think anyone would be disappointed with any. So let's go. Number one, my favorite trigger is the Overwatch Precision trigger. I mean, hands down, this is my favorite trigger out of all of them. Is it the best one? I think the best one, depending, for me, is this one, but it's because I have the most time with it, maybe. I think economically that this does everything that these other triggers do, except for less money. The design and machine work of Killer Innovations is really nice, and their customer support team's super dope. So, like, you know, that's partly what you'll be paying for the Killer Innovations. So there isn't a bad trigger. number one, number 2, and number 3. But putting this at number 3 is really unfair, because this is still a top tier trigger. It's still really, really good. I know that really doesn't help people when they're looking to choose an aftermarket Gen 5 trigger, but the whole point of this video was to kind of prove that no matter what manufacturer of trigger out there that you pick, at least from the 3 that I've chose, you're not going to get a huge difference out of either of them, you know. So pick which one that you like the look of the most. You know, if the small details matter to you, you know, that's where it's going to matter. But not as crisp trigger on this one. Reset's just as good as the others. Profile is going to be bigger. These are smaller profile triggers. You know, if you're concerned about the safety on the Killer Innovations, you know, I get it, but you kind of had the same issue on the Overwatch, but it is easier to engage the safety blade, as this one protrudes out a little bit more. So there's definitely small little subtle differences and details out of each trigger, but they're all good triggers. I'm curious to see if the other Gen 5 triggers really aren't that big of differences in the other ones on the market. So that's just my experience on it. Tell me what yours is. I definitely need to try out some more Gen 5 triggers out there, but it's a long video just like my original was on this, but I did want to give the Tyrant a fair shake because of the non-polishing that I did. And you can see that, you know, they all pull about the same trigger weight, where this does pull a little bit heavier. You know, we're looking at, you know, 4.5, maybe 4.6 pounds on this, whereas, you know, the Killer Innovations basically pulls at 4.5, and this pulls under 4.5, you know, 4.2. So definitely the lightest trigger out there on out of my testing, whereas this is consistent 4.5, and this is maybe just a little bit over 4.5. So but that's just been my experience with Gen 5 triggers. Let me know what they are for you. So I appreciate anyone getting through a 35-minute video, and join me for other videos on you know, niche gun parts and stuff. So thanks for watching, and join me next time.